Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice is a fantastic game, combining beautiful visuals, genius sound design, and a brutal combat system. It's also by far the most streamlined of From Software's games, and with that comes the most comprehensive story. For those who don't know, the stories in these games, like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, are usually told through a cryptic mix of vague hints, often shown through brief cutscenes and item descriptions. While that works in the favor of those games, as you are trying to understand a world that is vastly bigger than you, Sekiro has a much more personal edge to its narrative. The game features longer cutscenes, but the player also has more agency and direct ties to the world. Nothing represents this shift more than your main rival and one of the two central antagonists, Genichiro Ashina. Genichiro works as a perfect foil to show the player's growth in overcoming the challenges of the game, and as a mirror to Wolf's goals and motivations. Genichiro's overwhelming strength and descent into monstrousness works in tandem with the player becoming more capable with the game's severe difficulty. His tragic storyline also hammers home the game's themes of loyalty and nation. Through each of the main encounters with him, the player learns more about the story and gains a greater understanding of their own ability. So join me, friends, as we take a look at why Genichiro works. Genichiro politely introduces himself to you by cutting your arm off. Actually, that's not quite true. You do have a chance to fight him right as you try to escape with Kuro. However, as you've just started the game and have barely gotten used to the combat system, he promptly crushes you into the dirt and leaves you for dead. This first encounter is incredibly difficult, as Genichiro opens with a barrage of flurries and perilous attacks which you have no idea how to counter. The game taking away the chance to retry this fight further solidifies this moment as a crucial point in the story. Wolf is beaten and broken, and you want to get back at Genichiro for humiliating you. By putting an extremely hard fight right as the player is getting to grips with the game, and by promptly denying them the ability to try again, the game incentivizes the player to seek out Genichiro and reclaim their honor. It not only shows the more narrative focus of the game, but also gives mechanical context for the player's goals to reach Kuro. It's a well-known trick of these games to put a seemingly impossible fight right at the start, to show the player through gameplay that they will die, but they can persevere and overcome. However, the difference here is that the player cannot challenge Genichiro again until much later in the game. This almost certain loss is always going to be in the back of the player's mind over the course of the early game. As you progress, taking down Genichiro's soldiers and his weaponized monsters, your desire to get back at him constantly rises, all building up to the showdown on top of Ashina Castle. This first rematch is undoubtedly one of the hardest fights in the game. Genichiro is relentless, using an onslaught of flurries, perilous attacks, and bow shots, many of which specifically track the player's position as they try to heal. Attempting to side dodge or hit and run will result in the player getting clipped and caught over and over again. You have to learn the nuances of the posture system by mixing constant pressure and well-timed counters. It's a hard fight, and you do die a lot, but there's a moment where it all clicks. You deflect his flurry, dodge his arrows, and read his perilous attacks. You enter a kind of zen in a beautiful dance of blades. The clang of swords and the whoosh of a Makiri counter keep you laser-focused on weaving between attack and defense. You feel like you're on much more even ground, and even if you slip up, you know that you can conquer this duel. So you whittle him down and land that crucial strike. And then just when you think you've beaten him, Genichiro enters his third stage and hits you with a fucking bolt of lightning. Genichiro is an excellent teaching moment for the player, a critical skill check to make sure they understand the deeper mechanics of the game's combat. While the player can go explore other areas, their story progress is locked behind overcoming this personal struggle. After learning his moveset and no doubt dying over and over and over, you finally conquer this challenge, striking the bastard down with a glorious final death blow. Beaten and broken, Genichiro slinks away. This fight serves as the end of the early game, and now that the player has reclaimed their honor by rescuing Kuro and defeating their nemesis, they can move on and uncover the plot to end the dragon's heritage. After this battle, Genichiro takes a back seat, until he returns for one last fight.
Might.
In the final battle, as Ashina burns, Genichiro stands in your way one last time. But this time, you've overcome foes several times more formidable. You've conquered demons and gods, and Genichiro's new blade cannot help him. You take him down in a single phase, and Genichiro admits he is powerless. In desperation, he summons Isshin, the person he wished he could be, out of acknowledgement that the player has surpassed him. The true final boss fight begins as an act of Genichiro's ultimate defeat. As you begin the long fight with the Sword Saint, you are constantly reminded of how far you've come by quickly dispatching of your once mighty rival. Genichiro goes from an impossible curb stomp to a brutal challenge to finally an inconvenience. This progression is reflected in how Wolf changes the way he draws his sword. In the first fight, Wolf meekly feels for the hilt. In the second, Wolf slowly draws Kusabimaru, but in this final encounter, Wolf quickly and easily draws his blade. Through Genichiro, the game shows the player's growth and capability. Genichiro as the speed bump before Isshin serves as a reminder to the player to persevere despite the seemingly insurmountable odds, because they've done it before. The fact that this last fight takes place where Wolf first lost his arm adds even greater weight. And what I find to be even more interesting is how this genius game design works in perfect harmony with the narrative. So, let's take a look at how Genichiro acts as not just a mechanical challenge, but as a deeply personal narrative foe. Genichiro only cares about one thing: Ashina. For him, his nation is everything. This is even reflected in his name, as Ichiro roughly translates to first son. While Genichiro was not originally born into the Ashina clan, he was adopted into it after being orphaned during Isshin's rebellion. Genichiro most likely has a burning desire to preserve the Ashina clan because this transformed him from an orphaned peasant to a respected noble and fearsome military leader. He internalizes this fondness as not just for the family, but for the nation as a whole. Without Ashina, Genichiro would have remained a worthless nobody, another casualty lost to the violence of the rebellion. To Genichiro, Isshin and the kingdom formed after the rebellion were what gave him purpose. As the Interior Ministry threatens to close on Ashina, Genichiro becomes desperate. Since his adopted grandfather's health is failing, and since Kuro refuses to give him the dragon's blood, Genichiro looks towards saving Ashina by any means. This includes using forbidden lightning techniques, engaging in animal cruelty, kidnapping Kuro to guilt trip him, and working with the monks of Senpo Temple, who, get up to some stuff. To Genichiro, as long as Ashina can be saved, the ends justify the means. He explains why to Kuro in one of the game's remnant memories. This dogmatic attitude is perfectly reflected in his third phase. He removes his formal armor to reveal a scarred, monstrous body, as he claims he is willing to forsake humanity itself to ensure Ashina's survival. This transformation shows his increasing desperation, building up to his final sacrifice. In the final fight, since he can't defeat Wolf, and because Isshin symbolizes the peak of Ashina's strength, Genichiro ends his own life to resurrect his war god grandfather. Succeeding Isshin was everything Genichiro wanted to do for Ashina, and since he couldn't do that, he offered his own life for his country. Now that may sound like a noble goal, but the game spends its entire narrative proving him wrong. Loyalty is one of Sekiro's major themes over the course of the story, and the way Wolf and Genichiro view it are wildly different. Wolf has one loyalty that he cares about, and that is protecting Kuro. Everything you as the player do in the game serves this goal of protecting him and helping his plans to sever the immortal oath. Though Wolf initially opposes doing anything that might endanger his lord, Kuro convinces him that ending the dragon's blood will stop the cycle of violence and power grabs. So Wolf follows his personal loyalty, one based in helping and caring for an individual person. In contrast, Genichiro has a much more abstracted loyalty to the nation of Ashina. He cares more about his nation's existence than its people. He tries to bully Kuro into giving him dragon's blood so that Ashina can be protected, but it's also very likely that this would only lead to more chaos. Genichiro refuses to acknowledge that his beloved homeland was created out of a violent uprising, the same type of conflict that led to him being orphaned. His mind has been so poisoned by his time as a member of the Ashina clan that he worships a miserable cycle of violence. On top of that, as Genichiro becomes more desperate, his lofty patriotic goals become more similar to the other powers seeking immortality. Senpo Temple and the Fountain Palace nobles are trying to reach an immortal state and abandon their humanity. Their methods work, but at a significant cost, with a horrifying transformation that often makes them emotionless puppets or animalistic monsters. Except where Senpo Temple and the Palace nobles seek immortality for enlightenment or personal gain, Genichiro's ambitions have the potential for catastrophic disaster. Genichiro is willing to abandon his humanity and gain immortality to become an invincible killing machine. No good will come from his plans, and the game takes special care to disprove him through mentions of what he would become. Genichiro, if left unchecked, would transform into a ruthless demon, otherwise known as Shura. The Shura ending explicitly shows how Genichiro's plan will only cause devastation and chaos. While Genichiro constantly searches for ways to abandon his humanity and assert control, such a path will only create a ravenous monster, one that abandons any form of loyalty and becomes obsessed with killing. The Shura ending, also known as the bad ending, shows how this happens. When Owl attacks Ashina Castle, he forces Wolf into a difficult choice: obey the Iron Code and forsake Kuro, or abandon it and disobey his father. Most players choose the correct option to protect Kuro, 1, because Kuro's best boy must be protected, and 2, Owl is already shady as hell, and seems to be up to no good. The player then faces Owl in one of the best boss fights in the game, and the story continues, with the player helping Kuro sever the dragon's blood. However, if Wolf abandons this personal loyalty and becomes a rogue shinobi, everyone dies. With no personal ties besides his manipulative and power-hungry father, Wolf becomes an emotionless killer.
狼よ、そなたに任す。見事打ち破ってみせよ。御意。
You have to fight and eventually kill Emma and Old Man Isshin as they desperately try to stop you from unleashing carnage. When you do, Wolf then stabs Owl in the back and abandons Kuro. Armed with the 2 mortal blades, Wolf goes on a rampage. The game then ends, harshly and abruptly, with a brief description of a brutal massacre after Wolf transformed into the unstoppable Shura demon. This ending is deliberately unsatisfying. Both Emma and Isshin have done everything to help you, and it feels awful just murdering them for no reason. You are not heroic in this version of the story, not by a long shot. Each of these characters have made it clear that they would give their lives to prevent a demon from arising. This comically grim ending serves as a direct, in-story refutation of Genichiro's plans. The thirst for violence for any purpose turns people into savage monsters, and giving immortality to those people is a recipe for total disaster. While Genichiro believes he's only trying to preserve his country, he too would have become a destructive abomination. Violent nationalism is bad, actually. There's also an extra hidden detail, big thanks to Zuli the Witch for finding this, where Owl has fucking decapitated Genichiro and uses his head as a grisly trophy. He too would have been killed by the same destructive power he sought to control. But Wolf is different. While Wolf could have gone down this path of bloodshed, he doesn't, and preserves his personal loyalty to the noble Kuro. This devotion to upholding his word makes him different from the other major players in the story. The warring factions and villains all want to become immortal for their own selfish gains. But Wolf and Kuro recognize that this will only cause massacre after massacre with no end in sight. Wolf will take a sacrifice to honor the will of his master and friend to end the immortality. But before he can do that, Wolf faces Genichiro's hero, the sword saint himself, Isshin Ashina. Isshin deeply disapproves of his grandson's plans, despite the fact that Genichiro wants to preserve the country that Isshin himself created. This may seem like a total contradiction, as he certainly doesn't hold back during his fight. Jesus Christ, why do I do this to myself? Wolf can learn about how Isshin's mind may have changed through sake conversations. Isshin takes great pride in how his coup raised his clan out of destitution and misery, but he also acknowledges that, because of Ashina's rise in power, only more death and chaos has occurred.
日の本の乱れがこの人死に絶えぬ戦の炎がひとたびは好機となり国取りを果たした。だが今は死地にある。皮肉なことよ。
The constant bloodshed that he once reveled in hasn't stopped, and will only get worse, as both the Interior Ministry and other forces seek to lay claim to the land. Isshin seems incredibly conflicted about his clan's dwindling position, and he also believes that Genichiro's actions will only lead to more unnecessary slaughter. Despite this, when his grandson's dying wish is to see him resurrected to save the burning kingdom, Isshin obliges. While he disdains the actions Genichiro has taken, Isshin carries his own personal loyalty. If it is the last will of his family, Isshin is honor-bound to carry out the wish of his descendant. In the final fight, Isshin's peak physical form is Genichiro's ultimate vision for Ashina. He's an unstoppable monster of warfare, unchecked and immortal. Isshin uses the same techniques that earned him his title, as well as the forbidden lightning techniques that Genichiro had achieved. But Wolf overcomes Isshin, the great general that created Ashina. With the Sword Saint's defeat, Genichiro's plan finally crumbles. Both Isshin and Wolf fight not for nation or power, but out of their obligation and respect to the people they care about. Genichiro is not only defeated in raw strength, but in ideology as well.
やれ! 見事じゃ、Sekiro. さらば。
Genichiro Ashina is a masterpiece of game design. His 3 fights brilliantly showcase the player's growth and skill. He dwindles from an insurmountable wall to a brief fluke, in line with the player mastering the combat system. As well, Genichiro's villainous descent contrasts with Wolf's heroic nature. Wolf's dedication to preserving his humanity is what makes him a noble hero. While Genichiro wanted to preserve the immortal blood in a perpetual war for dominance, Wolf condemns the immortality and gives up his greatest power for the sake of his master. Getting to the end of the game and finally ending the immortal oath is a major accomplishment for both the player and Wolf because of the struggle against Genichiro. And that is why Genichiro works. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you'd like to see me talk about more games like this in the future. I'd love to discuss more FromSoft titles as well, so let me know if that sounds interesting to you. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, and if you want to see more videos like this in the future, be sure to subscribe. stay safe, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.